We are December 22nd, and you are listening to the Basu and Godin Notebook. I am Marc-Antoine Godin with Arpin Basu, who's talking to us live from Chicago. An easy trek, right?
Yes. It's been quite the trip, let me tell you. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
This being our final show of the year, we're going to take a little holiday break here, guys. But is it Festivus today?
No,
When's
it's
Festivus?
tomorrow, but you can start your grievances today.
Okay, so I have an airing of grievances to top this show with. So, and it's not a grievance, honestly. It's just like, today, back-to-back, travel on a back-to-back is always tricky, especially when you're not on the charter. So I thought I was going to be really smart upon arriving in Chicago. I'm walking to where the Ubers you get picked up on an Uber, and I see, there's a train downtown. It's fast. I was like, okay, well, let me see if I have a station near my hotel that's on this train. And so the O'Hare station is on the Blue Line, and on the Blue Line, there's a station called Grand. And then I look on the Google Maps. I see my hotel is 2 blocks away from Grand Station.
Perfect.
I'm like, perfect. I'm going to get on this train. I'm going to be ecologically responsible or environmentally conscious and not take a car. I'm going to take the train, and I'll probably get there sooner.
Yeah, sometimes using the train in Chicago can be faster.
It can be faster, yeah. And it probably would have been, except in Chicago, there are 2 stations named Grand.
Oh.
One is on the Blue Line, which is where I got off. One is on the Red Line, which is not where I got off. Now, it wasn't super far. It was about 1.5 kilometers. Also, my phone has died in the meantime, so I don't have my map. And then it's only 1 kilometer. So I go into a Starbucks, I plug in my phone, and I see it's only 1.5 kilometers away. No big deal. It's raining a bit, but that's not too long of a walk. And 2 seconds into that short but longish walk, one of the wheels on my suitcase busts. So for this one time I have to walk 1.5 kilometers with my suitcase, I got a busty wheel. So I am finally here with you.
Yeah.
You patiently waiting for me to get to this hotel room. I am here. And happy to be talking to you.
I knew it would
just
happen.
Before Christmas.
I knew it would happen. I told you. I said I gave you a time, and you said, "No, I'll make it up." Okay, fine.
Yeah. You said you're going to O'Hare, man.
Yeah.
You got to factor in O'Hare. And honestly, it would have been. I would have beat that. I would have hit my time more or less, maybe a little later, were it not for this subway station snafu.
Mm-hmm.
I was really on it. I was proud. The flight was a bit early, miraculously, coming into O'Hare, which almost never happens. And but anyhow, I'm here now. The Canadians are about to play the Chicago Blackhawks. By the time you listen to this, they will either be playing the Chicago Blackhawks they're in the process of playing the Chicago Blackhawks, or they will have played the Chicago Blackhawks. But we're not so worried about that. It's really talking about what the biggest trend with the Canadians right now, as far as I'm concerned, is the play of Nick Suzuki and the play of his line.
The play of his line,
which just continues. Yeah, which just continues to carry to drive the bus
for sure. I think there's Suzuki and Slavkovsky stand out probably more than Caulfield right now. But as a line, they're in their own stratosphere compared to all 3 other lines. It was really obvious against the Minnesota Wild. I brought up the fact that in previous episodes, the fact that they had to make sure during home games that Martin Saint-Louis would try to hide that first line from top opposition, which you cannot do on the road. And even though they were facing, whether it was Kaprizov or Eriksson Ek, but all the best elements of the Minnesota Wild, they still clearly came out on top when it came to shot shares, high danger chances and whatnot. They were super effective.
Goals.
They scored a goal. Yeah, absolutely. They were effective on the power play too.
But their expected goal number was outrageous. I mean, I think Suzuki was hovering around 80%.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that there's 2 things there. So first, there's Slavkovsky. You can tell that his development or his sudden jump ahead was not just a fluke. It seems like he's sustaining it. But now it's also Nick Suzuki who's really taking it to heart and proving that he's a bona fide first-line center and that he can carry his own line and help carrying this team. and it's even though the stats actually the actual number of goals and assists might not suggest that he's really developing into a lot more than he was before. There are other statistics that prove that he is, and I thought you wrote a very interesting piece on The Athletic the other day when you brought up the microstats that the Canadians are tracking through Christopher Boucher, their head honcho of the analytics department. So can you tell us more about the OGPs and how they relate to Nick Suzuki?
Well, so here's kind of the backstory. So at practice in Minnesota, I'd asked to get some time with Nick Suzuki, and Canadians VP of Communication, Chantal McAvey, said sure. And so the purpose of my sit down with Nick was that I had noticed that he was basically right on pace to produce exactly the same number of points as he did last year. And so we're already over a third into the season. It's a significant sample size. And I thought, my premise was that, we've been saying on this show, and I've written it, I've said it, that this is kind of the year for Nick Suzuki to show what he will ultimately be. Not that he's going to stop improving, but when you're 24 years old, you're in your fifth season, generally you are what you are, And I thought he should get the opportunity to answer that, since I've been saying it so much. So I was my intention when I sat down. And first off, he said, I don't think I've reached my ceiling. I think I've still got a lot of improvement to do. I find areas of my game that I need to get better at all the time. But as far as the stats are concerned, as far as the points are concerned, he's like, I don't look at those numbers. I don't look at results numbers, is what he said. I look at other numbers in terms of what I'm generating, what I'm creating, and what kind of offensive opportunities. And so then I start kind of delving into that. And eventually he gets to OGP, which, he gave me kind of a loose definition, but basically there's 8 elements to OGP, passes to the slot, and hang on, let me just pull it up.
Yeah, so OGP, just for the benefit of our listeners, OGP is offensive generated plays, which is
offense generating plays.
Yeah.
Offense generating plays. So plays that generate offense. Yeah. Basically, it's a very self-explanatory title. So anyhow, his OGP in the month of December was really high. And so basically OGP has 8 elements to it: passes to the slot, passes off the rush, passes 4 one-timers, carries to the slot, loose puck recoveries in the slot, shots on goal from the slot, outside shots for generated rebounds, and any goal that does not apply to the previous 7 categories. So a goal from outside.
There's a lot of in the slot into this, huh?
There's a lot of in the slot, and I think that's what Nick Suzuki took to heart. So this happened kind of at the beginning of December or somewhere around there. Adam Nicholas, the Canadiens director of hockey development, came to him with this stat and kind of showed who the top players are in the league in this stat and said, look at these guys. They're all performing super well. If you want to be in that group, then these are the kinds of things that you got to do to be in that group, because that will naturally just lead to points organically. You won't have to think about points even, just think about this. And, usually we hear guys say, I don't think of the numbers, but Nick actually said he thinks about this before the game, how he needs to get pucks to the slot. Goals are scored from the slot, whether it's me taking the puck to the slot, whether it's me passing it to the slot, whether it's me setting up one-timers. I need to be focused on this. Yeah. And you look at the game last night against Minnesota. I mean, Nick scores a tap in. It was on the power play, mind you, but he's right in the crease. Even Slavkovsky's tying goal, who's in the crease next to him or just behind him actually, is Nick Suzuki. And, and he's getting pucks there. And so, prior to the game in Minnesota, and actually prior to Wednesday night's games, to be even more accurate, Nick Suzuki was, I think, 17th in the NHL in OGP. And
that's for throughout the season, right?
No. That's just for the month of December. Just for the month of December. Because overall for the season, when I was talking to Nick at that time, he was 44th in the league in OGP, which is not quite first line. Well, I mean, it would be first line. If you just filtered out centers, maybe you'd be in the top 32 center-wise. Yeah. But he actually definitely would be. But it's, but he, at the beginning of December, he was 66th in the league. So he's made a big jump.
Right.
And this is just, I think it's very reflective that, everyone's like, oh, nerds with your analytics and all this stuff. But this is a stat that just got it into this player's mind. I'm not saying it would with everyone, got into this player's mind to just be hyper focused on that one area of the ice. And he's actually translating it into his game on the ice. And it's just a great way of showing how analytics can be married with the actual game on the ice and how it's played, and if they're applied properly. And so this is just one example.
Yeah, and what's interesting with that also is that we tend to think of statistics as results, whereas these statistics, OGP is a statistic that's a process statistic. So paying attention to that, a player would say, oh, no, I don't care. I don't watch. I'm not interested in those statistics. Man, you're missing a lot because it tells you about your process, and that's what you should be focusing on. If you think that the results are not the reflection of how you play, well, these stats are the reflection of how you play. And it's interesting also that Nick Suzuki took it to heart and started working on, increasing the number of plays that he would do in the slot. At the same time that Martin St. Louis started saying, guys, we need to go more on the inside. So it's not a coincidence that Martin St. Louis, even though I remember earlier in the season when I talked to him about analytics, he said, you got to take some and leave some. My eyes rarely lie to me. The fact remains that he pays attention to that stuff. And a guy named Nick Suzuki, who's a very cerebral guy, will say, okay, well, how can I apply it to my game? And he went to OGPs for that through the help of Adam Nicholas. And also I mentioned Chris Boucher because he's the one who developed that metrics when he was at Sports Logic. So it's not something that...
No, it was actually before he got to Sport Logic. Yep. He developed this metric when he was manually tracking games, like back in the day. Okay. It was like, you and I have a long relationship with him because he used to write a blog and he used to track Canadians games. He had all these cool microstats about the Canadians. And it was really, at least for me, he was the first guy I saw using microstats or developing microstats. And actually the word microstat itself I'd never heard before until he started doing it. And so it was back then that he developed this and he brought it with him to Sport Logic.
That's it. But through the clients of Sports Logic, more teams got access to it. So how you choose to use it, whether you use it or not, you're adapted. It's up to any team. But this is not something that only the Canadians use. But this is clearly something that they believe in and that is part of their process. And
and this is just one taste of it. Like this is where the Canadians have access to a wealth of things like this and can shape it in whatever way they want with whichever player they want in a way that they feel could or would benefit that player. And so, and plus you need to be receptive to it. I mean, Nick obviously has been. Some players probably wouldn't be quite as receptive and others would be as receptive, if not more so. But, it's not enough to just have an analytics department and to have a guy like Adam Nicholas who believes in it so much and can relate it to the players. It has to be used in an intelligent way. And you need buy-in from everyone, including the coach, including management, and the Canadians have that now after years of flat out ignoring it, and really not believing in it at all. And the key thing is that whenever you hear everyone say well, it's not the end all be all, I hear that all the time. That's the term. It's not the end all be all. No one's saying analytics is the end all be all. There's literally no one who is saying the only thing that's important in hockey are analytics. But it would be like saying,
well, in baseball, I would say that the guys who manage the pitchers on the Tampa Bay Rays probably think it's the end all, but in hockey, no, there's not such a dogma.
In hockey, no. And to say that because it's not the end all be all, we're just not going to use it is ridiculous. It's a helpful tool. And yeah, and Marty does look at that stuff, and and Chris Boucher, and he has an apartment. It's a modest apartment, but it's he has one, and so it's something the Canadians have successfully incorporated into their player development.
Yeah.
And I think as we see, and listen, it would be wrong to suggest that knowing about this stat is the only reason Nick Suzuki's playing well, because the reason Nick Suzuki's playing well, like the month of December coincides with how long basically he's been playing with Slavkovsky and Caulfield. I mean, their first game together, I believe, was against Seattle, so that's December 4th.
Yeah.
So, it's to me, it seems like that's the biggest reason, is that they found something with this line. But this stat being there just validates in Suzuki's mind, and he doesn't have to look at his point total and be like, "Oh man, I'm not producing the way I'd like to be." He looks at that number and he's feeling good about his game, and he should be, because he's playing super well. Yeah. He's playing really, really well. He's played the best hockey. This is the best little stretch of hockey we've seen from him in a long time. It's probably dating back to like the playoffs in 2021. He's been hyper effective. Like, he was dominant in Minnesota.
Absolutely.
He really driving that line, which is dominant. And so this is before the game against Chicago, obviously, but right now, among forward lines who have played at least 100 minutes at 5-on-5 this season, this is according to Money Puck, Slavkovsky, Suzuki, Caulfield is the 9th best line in the league in expected goal percentage, which is good. Yeah. They're better than Gensel, Crosby, Rust. Rust has obviously been hurt for a little bit. That Kaprizov line you mentioned, Kaprizov, Rossi, and Zuccarello was hurt last night. He didn't play, but that line is below them. The most surprising line on this list is 14th. Joshua Bluger Garland in Vancouver. Yeah, 14th. But otherwise, it's a who's who. Like, honestly, like, if you look, why would you not want to be on this list? Like, number 1 is Hyman, McDavid, Nugent Hopkins. Number 2 is Trevor Moore, Danault, Fiala, Carrier, Roy, Colasar was 3rd, which is another one that kind of jumps out.
Except that they've been the best fourth line. I mean, Carrier has always been on the best fourth line for years now, and Colasar is super effective too. Yeah, it's a great line. Yeah, so, but Palat, Hischier, Bratt, Bertuzzi, Tavares, Nylander, the Kadri line in Calgary, the Barkov line in Florida, the Stahl line in Carolina. It's good company. And there's a lot of good lines that aren't on this list. It's not the end all be all, but they're driving play, and they're controlling their share of scoring chances at a level that is first line worthy. I would say. So the fact that Slavkovsky figured things out in terms of using his body, protecting pucks, getting pucks first, just retrieving, and being so effective at that. It was clear that this is something that was an element that Suzuki and Caulfield needed. That they need a guy who could do puck retrieval, not necessarily always be F1. You discussed it, in a previous episode, the fact that he could be just as effective in along the boards in puck protection or in takeaways as an F2 or an F3. But the fact that there's clearly a switch that's been turned on, and all of a sudden he's this monster of possession.
Yeah.
How big an effect do you think that it has on the other two and in their ability to spend ozone time like galore?
Well, I mean, it's a direct correlation. I mean, there's no denying that it's his combination of his feet and his understanding of how to use his body to separate the puck from the puck carrier. It's not a matter of him going and killing people along the boards. I mean, he does that occasionally, but that's really not what he's doing. But he's being physical in the sense that he is aggressively arriving at the puck. He's taking the correct angle to cut off the puck carrier. And once he gets there, he separates that guy from the puck. I mean, with relative frequency. And once he does that, he puts the puck in a good spot where one of Suzuki or Caulfield can go get it. And the more time Suzuki specifically has with the puck on his stick in the offensive zone, the more that OGP is going to go up. because he's going to get pucks to the slot, and Caulfield's going to start getting more shots.
Yeah.
And so it's really, and the thing is that Caulfield's doing that stuff too, but it's not as noticeable because he's not quite as successful at it. But he is doing it. He's doing it in his own way, and and if he gets a little bit better at that, it'll just make this line better. And that's what they're focused on with him, is him making plays that get the Canadians the puck, either on the defensive zone or in the offensive zone to continue possession. But it's yin and yang. It's a direct line from Slafkovsky getting good at that to all of these other things improving as a result, because it extends their shifts in the offensive zone. I mean, in Minnesota, they played in the offensive zone practically the whole game, and they were the only line to do so for the Canadians. I mean, it's funny if you look at the expected goal numbers from that game, or any number really, shot attempts, it doesn't matter. You look at anything out of that game at 5-on-5, and it's a cliff. Like Suzuki, Slafkovsky, and Caulfield are at 79, 78, and 77 in expected goal percentage. Gooley and Barron were at 52 and 50. And then the next person is Mike Matheson, who I thought had a good game. He's looking really good. He's at 35.2. And then it just goes down from there. The Canadians had 7 players below 10% in expected goal percentage.
You rarely see that. That's terrible.
7.
That's terrible. Yeah.
It's outrageous.
Yes.
So it's...
Yeah, and I think this is a nice segue to our next topic, because we just talked about what was going right for the Canadians. And the good thing is that we're talking about the best players on the team who are playing well. So that's encouraging. But if we look at other aspects, mainly the depth of this team up front, it's really starting to be an issue, because you can tell that the way of the long-term absences of Doc, of Newhook, of Hervé Pinard is really taking a toll on the other guys, because there are some lines that are outmatched on some nights, and you've got a fourth line that doesn't get the trust of Martin Saint-Louis. Night after night, you'll have Mitchell Stevens, Jesse Olonen getting 6-7 minutes a night, even though Emil Heineman got his first taste of the NHL against the Minnesota Wild.
For the record, sorry to interrupt, but for the record, it is Heineman.
Okay.
His name is pronounced Heineman. So for everyone out there, but I asked him,
Yes,
this is credit to Brian Mudryk on TSN, who let me know. And then after the game, I checked with him. Yes, it is Heineman. So,
okay.
Sorry. Carry on.
Yeah. So Heineman played, a tad less than 6 minutes yesterday. But the thing is, Martin Saint-Louis doesn't have any other guys to play. And it's a good thing that you've got Sean Farrell and Elias Anderson, who are coming back to play tonight for the Laval Rocket, because potentially those are guys that you could call up and say, okay, they're deserving of a chance to play Montreal, and just push these other guys. But whether it's Yoel Armia, that fourth line, or other guys that will have so games. I mean, Christian Dvorak was abysmal against the Wild. It's I find that the lack of depth really is putting a lot of pressure on the top guys to perform, and the other ones don't really have any accountability, because who are you going to replace them with? Whether you can scratch Pizzetta and say we're going to put Heineman in, but that's it. There's nobody's moving.
Well, what's funny about it to me is that when we started the season, this was, and I didn't disagree, I actually fully agreed with him, that the Canadian strength was their depth up front, right? Injuries have obviously led to that no longer being the case. I mean, you take Doc and Newhook out. Those are 2 top 6 spots being lost. And, Dvorak wasn't there at the beginning of the season. Armia obviously was in the minors for a bit. But and so Stanley was asked about this yesterday before the game. And, his answer was interesting, because he said they're not playing as much, because we're in position to win games more often this year. That more than we were last year. Now you remember this trip last year. Not quite at this point, but this was the trip where they lost 9-2 in Washington. I think they had a 7-2 loss in there. They were just getting blown out of the water.
Yeah.
Well, the fact that they're competing in games, the fact that they can smell the playoff race still, and I think a lot of fans will hear me say that and be like, well, what the hell are they thinking about the playoffs for? This is ridiculous. We're in a rebuild. What are you doing? Well, Marty has a responsibility to the men in that room, and they believe in that, and he believes in it. And so when they hit the third period and it's a 1-goal game, which it invariably is, I mean, it was when you heard him after the Islander game saying we haven't been in that position of being up 4 goals in the third period. They've been in the position of being down in the third period, but more often than not, they're in the game in the third period. It's a 1-goal swing or tied 9 times out of 10 with these guys. So they get into that situation, and he, rightly or wrongly, just does not trust those guys to get the job done. And bless his heart, Mitchell Stevens, but he's an AHL player, and Heineman has NHL potential, and I think Alonen has NHL potential, and I think Anderson, if he can get up to speed, would be an interesting option. Not really a typical fourth line type of player, but could be an interesting option to bring up and maybe give him a shot at kind of rekindling or jumpstarting his NHL career. Remember, top 10 pick formerly. So, you remember Marty talking about all the options he had? Every answer was, well, we have a lot of options.
Right. Not so
doesn't
much.
Look like they have a lot anymore. Doesn't look like they have a lot of options anymore. And so he's making do. And honestly, and they don't. And it's not his fault. It's just, that might sound like I'm kind of playing gotcha with Marty with what he said at the beginning of the season, but you look at his options and he doesn't have any. He could sort of juggle around the second and third line. Like you mentioned that Dvorak was awful. I mean, that Evans, Monahan, Anderson line was awful as well in Minnesota after having what I thought was a really good night in Winnipeg. I thought they played really well. The numbers don't kind of show it, but they started every period. They had the puck in the offensive zone more often than not. I thought, even though again the numbers didn't reflect that, but I thought they had a really good game forechecking wise and having zone time, even though they didn't really generate much shot wise or chance wise. But just spending time in the offensive zone for these other lines can create the type of momentum that the Suzuki line could benefit from if they were to come on the ice and not have to stop the bleeding.
Exactly.
And just continue what's going on with the other lines, except Minnesota, that's what they were doing. Like, not only did they have a dominant game and played in the ozone that much, but they also successfully cut Minnesota's momentum once every 3 or 4 shifts. It was like Minnesota kind of knew that as soon as those guys come on, we're defending. And that's their best players doing that. That has an impact, It was like Brock Faber, what a phenomenal game that kid played. I mean, he was 33 minutes. He's played, I think, 4 of his last 5 games. He's been 30 minutes or over.
Yeah.
Just smooth, solid, good decisions. But he had to take them on, more like a lot. And so that has such a big impact. But they need some help. That's the thing, is they need help in that department.
You mentioned the Monahan line. I thought that Jake Evans probably was the most energetic of the 3, but maybe that if they're able to find someone who's got a little bit of offensive potential that could replace him, so that he can help out the lower lines, it could help balance the lineup a little bit. But I don't mean to harp on the guys who barely play and focus too much on, let's say, on the fourth line. But I really feel, after the game that Pizzetta played against the Islanders, and then he was scratched. No, against Winnipeg, and then he was scratched.
Against Winnipeg.
Yeah, and against Winnipeg, he struggled, and then he was scratched in Minnesota. I'm thinking Pizzetta is the sort of guy who, it's the same as last year, when the whole of first half of the season, he was playing with guys who did not fit his style. And now at some point, the Canadiens will have to say, okay, well, maybe if we are not the most potent offensive team, will we build a fourth line that can give us something offensively? And because if that's the case, and if it's not strictly meat and potatoes, Pizzetta is going to keep being lost. And last year, it's only Alex Bezil's call-up that saved the season, basically. And I feel like we're reliving the same thing again. So when I mentioned the names, the likes of Sean Farrell or Elias Anderson or even Emil Heinemann, who was just called up, those guys could give you more offensively than Pizzetta. So what's exactly the future of a guy like that on your team if the rest of the roster starts being built differently than to what he can really give you?
Well, I think there's an avenue to having a fourth line that Pizzetta would not only fit in on, but would probably thrive under. Like, if they had better health and if they could put together a line of, like, say, Evans, HP, and Pizzetta, that could be a line that could create some of that zone time I was talking about earlier. A fourth line that might not get you goals, but they can go play in the offensive zone a little bit. They can forecheck hard. They can be physical. They can just possess the puck a little bit more than what's currently happening. But that would take some health. And I think Marty prefers having a fourth line like that. I think he's a bit of a traditionalist in that sense when it comes to the composition of a fourth line. He wants a line that's physical, that's difficult to play against, but also that can cycle the puck and keep the puck in the offensive zone from time to time at least, but really that hard to play against style is what I think in an ideal world Marty would want on his fourth line, but it can't be completely at the expense of the ability to play with the puck. The current iteration of it is more offense. There's more offensively bent to it. And yeah, I think let me just share something about the fourth line, because you might think that Marty kind of hates his fourth line, which you wouldn't be wrong. It seems because they don't play in the third period. But the other day,
well, he's skeptical towards Ulonen, and we know why Mitchell Stephens is there. So yeah, right.
So the skepticism towards Ulonen is what I wanted to talk to you guys about. So it's like in Minnesota prior to the practice. It's about 20, 25 minutes before practice is going to start. The goalies usually go out early and take shots. And Ilonen's always one of the guys that's taking the shots. This time it was Ilonen and Heinemann. And Ilonen's there all the time. And so, but on this day, Marty jumped on the ice at this time, which was unusual. He used to do that a lot before, doesn't really do that much anymore. And grabbed Ulonen and took him to the other end of the ice and started working on something with him. And it was just it was a really specific detail about how you take the puck off the boards on a rim.
Okay.
Whether it's in the offensive zone or the defensive zone. Really hyper specific. So, when Marty says Ilonen's got to work on the details of his game in order to get more ice time, he's not just saying that in order for Ilonen to sit on the bench all the time. Like, he actually believes it, and he's trying to implement it with him, and he's trying to get him to improve those details so that he can get on the ice more. Because I do think he believes in the skill set. There's when there's such high leverage situations, and a mistake or a turnover will be so costly to his team. It's situations like he was working on with him on Wednesday, where instead of getting pinched on the boards and having to battle for the puck and losing that puck battle and the other team getting it and either getting out of their zone or maintaining their time in the Canadian zone, by doing this one little detail, you have a better chance of avoiding that battle altogether. It was basically the point. So it's
positioning your body and positioning your stick blade too, right? To stop the puck on the rim.
I'm not going to get into exactly. Like, instead of using your skate to do it, it's using your stick, which is something he's worked on with Caulfield. He's worked on it with Anderson. He's worked on it with a lot of guys. But the point being that he's working on it with a guy that everyone would assume that he doesn't trust and he therefore doesn't like. It's not true. He needs Ulonen to get things like this squared away in his game so that he can be on the ice late in the third period.
What makes me smile is that specific detail. Saying we worked on that during a morning skate or in last year, this week last year, we were in Denver and he worked with Jonathan Kovacevic, who could
Yeah.
not believe how specific, detailed, and helpful St. Louis was in just giving him tips on that part of the game. And that was was a year ago today almost.
And even before that, so last year, remember I did a piece on Marty's video work.
Yeah.
So in that piece, Josh Anderson told me about how once a week Marty would grab him, bring him in the room, just him and Josh, and they would look at clips. And this was one of the things he showed Josh. And the very next game, it was in New Jersey, and he didn't remember the clip. He's like, we were playing in New Jersey, and I did it. I did what he asked me to do, and it worked. And so then I went and I watched that game, and I found the clip. And basically, it led to, instead of him getting pinned against the boards, it led to HP getting a decent transition chance. It wasn't a great chance, but still, he exited the puck. The puck left the zone, and HP skated 3/4 of the length down the ice and got a decent shot on net from the opposing faceoff circle or the opposite faceoff circle. But yeah, and then there was a time he was doing this with Caulfield at some point. It's something that he really believes in. Actually, after his scrum yesterday morning in Minnesota, that's when I kind of asked him. I was like, "Hey, what were you working on with Ulanen?" And he sort of reluctantly got into it, but once he got into it, he got into it. He was fully explaining the whole thing, and you got a glimpse of what it's like to be taught by Marty, and you could tell why the players react to that, because he went from being kind of reluctant to talk about it to being fully engaged and fully into talking about it in like that, because he just can't help himself. It's like he's like, this is a detail. He's like, Cooch works on this all the time. Cooch is great at this. Datsuk used to do this so well. 10 minutes. He went on for 10 minutes about this thing. And myself, Guillaume Lefrançois, and Eric Ingles were just standing there. We're just like entranced by it. Like, it's just like you're just listening to this. And so when the players say, we really love playing for him and we really love the way he presents things, it's because he's so engaged and he's so enthusiastic, and he's intense, but in a good way, like not in an intimidating way or a negative way. It's just like his intensity seems infectious. Like, I'm going to be honest with you, man, like a quick response would have sufficed. I just wanted to know, because I shot some video of it. I'm going to put it in my piece on Monday. I was like, I just need to explain what was going on. And instead we got like a dissertation on this thing, on how to take pucks off the boards, which was great. It was amazing. Don't think I was, but it wasn't like we kept it going forever. He just got so into it that I think he just stopped realizing, like he was like moving, and he had his like those movements he makes with his hands, and he's like going like all this stuff. So we got a little taste of what I think the players get every day.
Right. So, but back to an earlier point you were making, he shows that he believes in Ulanen by investing all this time in him. And last year, he was going on and on about how Pezzetta could become a better player, and he had plans for him. And he invested a lot of time also after morning skates, especially during the time that Pezzetta was an extra.
The whole first half of the season, basically.
Yeah. And so I'm thinking, okay, so he believes in all these guys. And he's got faith in all of them, and he's willing to take the time in order to teach them and make them better players. But at some point, I mean, we're talking about fringe NHL players who are knocking at the door of their mid-20s. The question here is, with all this time and energy from Martin St. Louis and teaching guys, would be better served by players who ultimately are identified as having a bigger upside at a younger age, and who would show a trajectory of improvement and understanding and applying what they're being taught at a higher rate than those guys, So I'm just, because honestly, this is all great. The fact that, hey, I'm going to take any guy I've got, I'm going to work with him, going to make a better player. Yeah, sure. But if that guy, if they were doing that, let's say with Emil Heinemann over half a season, They might end up with better results than what they've got so far from Ulonen.
Yeah, and it's there's a lot of practices in a year. He did. This is just example of one day, but yeah, I think what this demonstrates is even if a young player is not playing all that much, there are benefits to him being in this environment. It's not just Marty. It's Adam Nicholas works with these guys. They do video. There's lots going on behind the scenes that we don't see, So,
and that's true. But that's also true for Caden Primo in goal.
Yes, it is. Although I think his case is a little different, just because he's sharing a goalie coach with two other goalies. The goalie coach has to be kind of prioritize the guy who's going to play a little bit with his time, but he is getting some time. But I think in his case, it is a little different in the sense that he needs to play games. Mm-hmm. Like it's. Whereas, like let's say Sean Farrell were to come up and then Marty, let's say, and I don't think he will anytime soon. He's going to have to show something else in Laval, and there's other candidates to come up. I personally think guys like Sean Farrell, Josh Roy, Kidney, Mayu, the Canadians want them to spend the whole year in Laval.
Yeah.
If at all possible. Because otherwise, Josh Roy would be in Montreal right now. It wouldn't be Mitchell Stevens that would be called up, even though he could play center. They could easily have Jake Evans playing center and have Josh Roy playing in Jake Evans' spot. Mm-hmm. So, but they want to keep them in Laval. So, but let's just say, for argument's sake, and Heineman is a good example. If Heineman comes out of the lineup for whatever reason, he'll have access to this stuff. He will get better even if he's not playing, and even if he is sitting for the entire second half of the third period, like he did last night in Minnesota. So now, I think your point is fair, but it's something to keep in mind that this is just a glimpse or a snapshot of something that the Canadiens environment does for these players. And it's just meant as that. It's just something that I noticed, a bunch of us noticed Wednesday morning before practice. A guy who's having trouble getting consistent ice time, a guy who's Marty has publicly said needs to work on the details of his game, but didn't just say that. He actually went out and worked on a detail of his game. And this is the kind of details that Marty's talking about when he refers to details.
So Ulonen was, I remember earlier in the year, Martin St. Louis was saying, I would like to find roles for all of my players. And that hinted as giving, if possible, a PK role to some of his supporting cast, and Ulonen had a bit of a try on the PK, which pretty much ended up the minute that Yoel Armia came back, and even though Yoel Armia was sleeping at the wheel yesterday on a goal, he's got overall in the season his expected goals against on the PK is roughly half of what Ulonen is. So there's a difference there in efficiency, but the PK.
What the hell was he doing on that goal, man? I can't get over. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I don't know what the hell he was thinking on that goal.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
I don't know. He was there, but not there. yeah. He didn't give much of a chance.
But he was not there. He was nowhere. He was in no man's land. He was not guarding anyone.
No.
He was too high to be guarding Boldy. Mm. He was too low to be taking care of Faber at the top. He was just doing. He
could not intercept a pass from his vantage point.
From anywhere,
and nobody was there otherwise. Yeah, he was in orbit. So anyway, regarding the PK, because that's where I was going with this. So on the one hand, when the game was on the line against Minnesota, and Cole Caulfield was called for a dubious cross-checking penalty,
an awful cross-checking penalty. Just the officials really had a bad game.
Yeah.
Anyhow, sorry.
So
carry on.
So the PK kept the puck most of the time and made sure that the
Wild but how did Marco Rossi get an instigator? I'm sorry to interrupt again, but now you got me thinking about the officials. Why did Marco Rossi get how did he get an instigator penalty? Just for going up to Gouli and kind of being like, hey, don't hit my guy so hard, and then Gouli decides to drop the gloves and pound him, and he got the instigator. I've never seen a guy take his glove off second and get called for an instigator penalty. I'm sorry, that's my digression. You carry on.
Can I go now?
Yes, now you can go. Sorry, I got it out of my system.
Yeah.
So, carry on.
Despite that play on the PK, the big picture is that the Canadians gave up 2 more goals on the PK, and they're trending downwards. When you look in October, their efficiency rate on the PK was 75%. In November, it went down to 72.7%. And right now in December, it's at 69.2% before the game against Chicago. I thought that it could be tweaked and improved faster than the power play, but honestly, I'm really starting to wonder, how are they going to fix this? I mean, we started talking about Nick Suzuki. He had pretty good numbers personally on the PK, but do you really want to play him even more than he already is? I mean, some of it is on the goalies. I've always said that Samuel Montembeault was great 5-on-5, but he struggled on the PK. And this year again, I mean, look at the numbers. Jake Allen is .868 on the PK. Primo is .857, and Monty is .810. So that's not going to cut it, but it's not just the goalie.
No, it's not just the goalie. But although, as a team, at 5-on-4 or 4-on-5, the Canadians are 6th worst, save percentage-wise, in the NHL. And the teams ahead of, Winnipeg's surprising, but Ottawa's the worst, 79.84.
Yeah, Korpisalo's.
Chicago's Korpisalo's been, wow. It's weird that Pierre Dorion would target a goalie on the free agent market, and he turned out to be not good. That's strange.
It's never happened before.
It's never happened before. It's so odd. 80.47 Chicago, 83.04 Carolina, 83.57 Winnipeg, which is weird, 83.94 Edmonton, which is not weird, and that's Montreal.
Yeah.
83.98. But aside from that, expected goals against, Canadians are 5th worst in the NHL. 9.07 per 60. Goals against per 60, 2nd worst in the NHL, 10.2. So it's a combination of things. They've given up roughly 1 more goal than expected goal. So yes, the goaltending's been bad, but they're giving up chances at an unsustainable rate, a rate that's not going to lead to any lasting success. And it's hard not to think I don't want to say it's tactical, because they're playing the system that basically every team in the NHL now plays, the fronting diamond system.
Yeah.
But they are slow to adjust to teams that attack it at its weak points. Minnesota actually did this in Montreal too. But they have players like Kaprizov and Boldy in particular who can be really dangerous coming from the goal line. And that's the weak point of the diamond, is obviously where there's only one player, So if a diamond is, you have a player up top who's generally responsible for that top defenseman. You have a player basically more or less in each circle who's trying to take away the flank one-timer, which is the most dangerous shot on a power play. But then you have one guy left to cover kind of those low jam plays. And that's the play that you kind of give up when you play a fronting diamond system. And when teams start to attack from that area, that low jam goal line area, I find the Canadians don't have an answer for that. Mm-hmm. They don't adjust to it quick enough. And it's not a surprise. They know that that's where teams would have to attack. But they just don't. I felt like the Wild were getting to the net from there quite consistently, quite often. So it's a work in progress, but it doesn't seem to be progressing, to be honest with you. It's just work right now. There's no progress happening.
No. And I feel because I see progress on the power play. There are some times where they won't set up and it's going to be bad, but generally speaking, I feel like they're getting somewhere with Suzuki playing at the goal line, because, as you just mentioned, the passes from the goal line to the slot are among the most effective ways to generate chances in today's NHL on the power play. And the Canadians struggle defensively to counter that. But right now, I don't know if it's just a matter of finding better personnel. It might be just that, because they don't have a ton of guys that you say, they're specialists. That team doesn't have Barclay Goodrow or Gourde, let's say, who's a very good penalty killer.
Evans could be that guy. I thought Evans could be that guy, and maybe he could still be that guy, but if he were properly surrounded. But I think he's potentially one of those specialists that you're referring to.
Yeah,
he better be. Like that's gonna for the longevity of his career. He needs to get that identity. He needs to get known as that guy.
Yeah,
as a face-off winner and a penalty killer, and you're not going to get known as that guy going whatever he went last night. What did he do? 1-9 in the face-off circle. Yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of a one-off. It's not really something that that he does regularly, but being a guy who wins, draws, and kills penalties is the way that Jake Evans is going to get another contract in this league. And so, whether that's in Montreal or elsewhere. But yeah, other than him, I agree with you. And Armia, who normally is very good, just wasn't last night, but is normally a very good penalty killer. They don't have that guy.
Do you think Armia could be bought out? Because it's really not a big number for the next 2 years if they choose to do
that. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I think honestly, actually, if they wait till this season, yeah.
There's only one.
They're just buying 1 year left. Yeah, because there's 1 year left, and if the Kings are willing to eat some of it, I think they might be able to trade him for nothing. Obviously, you wouldn't really get anything in return, and you might even have to take a bad contract back on top of eating money. I don't know, but I do think they would explore that. They would explore that to its fullest before buying him out, because they've already dipped into next year with Petrie and the retention. I think he had to, I think because they got a pretty good draft pick and DeSmith, and what Kent called a prospect, though Nathan Legare is it Nathan Legare? No. Who else? Lindstrom. They got Lindstrom, who's already proven to be a useful depth defenseman. They were willing to do that, but I think there's already a leeriness because they had to do that once, and I don't know the extent to which they would want to do it again.
Because if they bought out Armia instead of keeping some money, holding some money in a trade, that's less than $900,000 for next year, and roughly $1.25 million the year after. So it's almost, for a team that's in their situation financially, it's almost inconsequential.
Yes and no. I mean, in the sense that I think by 2025, 26, the Canadians would like to be somewhat competitive. And that would still be the last year of Carey Price's contract. So they would still be working in a very delicate financial environment. Yes, Carey Price's contract provides salary relief, but it does make it complicated. So I think just adding an extra close to 1.3 million, when you don't necessarily have to, would be preferable to avoid, because the one thing is that Petrie will be off the books by then. That's the first season they won't have the Petrie retention on the books. So you could replace, and if you look at it that way, then you're basically adding $1 million in cap space, because Armia would be about $1 million less than Petrie is right now. So Petrie's 2.343 for the next 2 years.
That's it.
Yeah,
this year
Armia would be about 1.
This year, next year.
This year, next year. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So one more year, and then that last Armia year, the 1.3. So you'd have a $1 million difference. But yeah, again, I just don't. I think they would do everything in their power to move him, but maybe if they can't, I mean, this man traded Mike Hoffman. Like, just keep that in mind. This guy traded Mike Hoffman.
I know.
Anything is possible. Anything is possible.
That's true. So, all right. Hey, man, it's Friday, which means Future Friday.
We need a jingle. We need a jingle for Future Friday.
We don't even have a regular jingle.
Yeah, I know.
We'll need two then.
We'll need two jingles. Yeah.
Call a friend. Call a friend. So the World Juniors are at our doorstep. We spoke about Owen Beck last week. Great beginning of tournament for him. He was a player of the game for Canada against Switzerland. But it's time we talk about our boy Lane Hutson.
Yeah, let's talk about Lane Hutson. He's going to be a very important piece of what's looking like a really high-powered U.S. team.
Yeah.
Yeah. And,
one of the 8 returnees on that team.
Yeah, exactly. Should be anchoring the top pair. I think he's been playing with Chesley, if I'm not mistaken.
Chesley,
yeah. And so I had a chance yesterday to talk to Jay Pandolfo, his coach at BU.
Yeah.
And just to kind of, give our listeners and my readers a sense of what's happening in the season in BU. And the first thing Pandolfo said, because I was like, listen, I can look at stats and I can even watch games and I can see that he's offensively that he has not skipped a beat. So what are you seeing that is most improved from his freshman year to his sophomore year? Immediately went to his defensive game. And what's interesting is that, he's getting stronger. He is, but he's still never going to be a guy who's going to outmuscle guys in front of the net or who's going to, outmuscle people in board battles or what have you. So, he said he's really learning how to use leverage much better. He's getting under sticks a lot better. He's avoiding battles better. But it's interesting to him how Lane's offensive skill set, he's learning to apply it to defense, the quickness, the deception, all that stuff.
Yeah.
He's like, he'll just be smarter. He'll outsmart people in battles, basically. And then once he's managed to free the puck, his ability to just skate it out is another, in Pandolfo's mind, is another kind of defensive skill, sure. Is that if you can one man break it out or make that really heady pass that relieves the pressure. So, the one thing he said, so I would watch for that during this tournament. But he said, he was like, I have no doubt in my mind that offensively, Lane Hutson is not going to have any problem playing in the NHL. And I was like, I think a lot of people would see that already. Mm-hmm. The issue is the defensive play. And he's like, yeah, I know. And what I'm telling you is that he is so committed to improving it and has already shown so much improvement that I have less and less doubt that this is going to be an issue in the NHL. So, and he said that every Monday, Lane goes into the coaches' offices, sits down with one of their assistant coaches, goes over the weekend's games, looks at all the defensive plays he made, how he can improve them. So he's committed to it.
Last year too.
Exactly. He's been doing well. That's just how he's wired, And so when you're watching him in the tournament, my suggestion would be, instead of focusing on the dazzling head and shoulder fakes and everything he does in the offensive zone, watch how low he gets when he enters a battle or when he's trying to box someone out, because Pandolfo's like, he doesn't box people out because he can't. So he just gets their stick tied up and he gets under them, and so that's something that I would watch out for in the tournament if you're watching Team USA play.
But I'm curious to see how he's going to fare on the bigger ice, though, because I think Hutson recognizes that it's harder to defend on the larger sheet. So it's, when he comes to angles, reading or closing plays, killing plays and closing gaps and whatnot, having a bigger ice will present its share of challenges that he's not normally facing when he's playing for BU. So if he does well in that environment, that will really bode well, I think, because it will not only show that he's capable of defending against like higher competition, but also that he's got great adaptability too.
Yeah, and really there are fewer, in one sense it could help him because there are fewer board battles on the bigger ice. You do play off, you do kind of play off. You should at least not be as aggressive, getting the puck and really sort of containing more than battling along the board. So maybe that'll help him. But listen, it's not, he's played on big ice before, and every other aspect of his game benefits from being on big ice. So, but yeah, defensively, I agree. It's just something to watch for. It's really, it's the big unknown in Lane Hutson's transferability from that level to this level. And, but yeah, I mean, Pandolfo is just kind of expressing, I think he has less doubt now that he'll be able to make that, because not only because his defensive game is improving, but the process through which Lane is improving it that's transferable to the NHL.
Right. Yeah.
So
but
just
the fact remains, though, that it's his transition skills, the playmaking ability, stuff like that will continue to impress and excite people and make make them look forward to the future. The future could come very soon. I think Kent Hughes is on the record saying that he hopes to sign Hutson at the end of BU season. Which means a contract and maybe a couple of games in Montreal, or even more than that, depending on how far BU is going to go in this for the rest of the season. But it's going to be very soon. He's going to be yet another left-handed defenseman who's part of that group, and he could, if he shows that sort of dynamism or those dynamic capabilities at the pro level, he's going to force the hand of the Canadians and say, okay, well, what do we do with the other guys? Because he's not someone
100%.
He's not 100%. Someone who's going to spend 4 years in Laval.
I don't think so, because the thing about Hutson, and I've talked to a couple of people on the Canadiens about this, and it's not, the question is whether he makes it or not.
Mm-hmm.
If he makes it, he will be a star. Like, that's kind of how they see it. Like, we don't know if he can play in the NHL, but if he can, we're going to have a special player. Right. They don't seem to believe that there's any gray area here. Like, it's really either he can play in the NHL or he can't. If it's door number one, then we have a star defenseman on our hands. I shouldn't say it so definitively. I don't think anyone has told me that definitively, but that's the belief that we have a potential star defenseman on our hands, assuming he can defend at the NHL level and play 20 minutes a night and not hurt the team and not have the plus minus. And I don't mean the stat plus minus, but the plus being the positive impact on the game versus a negative impact on the game, and have that be a deficit, having a deficit there. I mean, that's really so. Okay. If he can just kind of break even defensively, then he should be able to play in the NHL. Like, that's really the bar for him, is that.
Right. But at the same time, I mean, we see 9 in, 9 out right now. Jaden Struble playing 14 minutes a night. Before that, it was Jack Eye who was not playing more than that on the third pairing. Is there a world where Hutson, if he's got a certain level of defensive liability, but he can showcase his offensive, capabilities and be like a power play quarterback and be on the first unit guy, couldn't he turn into a specialist and be like your third pairing dazzling guy? I know it's out of fashion a little bit. You don't see that all too often right now in the NHL.
No, because he's a play driver. I mean, it's not just that he's a dazzling power play guy. Like, he drives play. He gets the puck from his end to the offensive zone, and then once it's in the offensive zone, he makes sure it stays there. You want that guy at 5-on-5, as long as he's able to hold his own. And honestly, the bar is not very high for him to be able to hold his own, quote unquote. Like, Erik Karlsson for years was a so-so defender, but his offensive skills made it so that not only was he producing at the other end, but he was getting pucks out of his zone and getting it to the other end because of his skating, because of his vision, because of everything. But you would never look at Erik Karlsson and say, wow, that's what a defender.
Or
no one's ever said that.
Matter.
Or Quinn Hughes. Quinn Hughes, I think, yeah. Quinn Hughes is the guy I look at the beginning. I think now it's quite different, but he's a guy I look at when I think of Lane is Quinn Hughes is going to be at the award ceremony this year. He will be a finalist for the Norris Trophy. Whether he wins it or not, I don't know, but he will be there. It would have been inconceivable even like 5 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, that someone who looks like Quinn Hughes would be a finalist for the Norris Trophy. But that's where we are. And so now will the Canadians be able to take it to another extreme and make it an even smaller guy in Lane Hutson? I think so. But honestly, let's see what he does in this tournament. It's really what's going to be the most compelling part is to see how he reacts in the defensive end, and what improvements he's made there. Because that's really the only thing preventing him from becoming an NHL star is if he can hold his own in that area.
So the name is Peter Anderson, and the year was 1985. That's the record for most points by a defenseman at the World Juniors. And Anderson had 14 points in 7 games. Alex Pietrangelo had 12 points in 6 games. He comes in second place. So, I wonder if Hutson would have a chance at that record and end up with more than 14 points. That'd be quite a feat.
I think he's got a shot. He's got a shot. He's going to get the usage. He's going to get with the firepower they have up front. I think he's got a shot at it. That team's going to score a lot of goals. There's no doubt about it. Lane Hutson's going to be on the ice a lot. So he's got a chance.
Yeah. Right now, he's in terms of points per game in the NCAA, he's second to a guy who's actually draft eligible this year. So
Bouillon?
Zeev Bouillon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's looking like a pretty nice prospect. He's actually on the World Junior team. He actually made the World Junior team as a draft eligible. So yeah. But obviously, Lane Hutson is not the only Canadian prospect on that team. Jacob Fowler is going to be in a battle for the starting goaltending job. It sounds like they're not really going to know who that guy is until they get to maybe even the medal round, possibly. They might. I think they're going to give him and Trey Augustine some runway. And as you reported, Fowler's probably more invested than normal in this goaltending battle because of who he's up against and who got drafted first at the last draft. So we'll see there. There's 2 really compelling stories for Canadians fans on Team USA this year, and they're 2 of the more the goaltending battle is probably the most compelling story there. Who's going to come out of it with? There's really no wrong answer there. They're both great goalies. But yeah, then Lane's chase for that record is, Canes are in a pretty good spot on that team. Yeah,
for sure. So as you said on top of the show, we're taking a break from the Notebook for a little bit. We're going to be back on Friday, January the 5th. So we both wish all of our listeners and viewers a Merry Christmas, great holiday period, and Happy New Year too. Or as Eddie Murphy used to say in Trading Places, Merry New Year!
It's Coming to America that you're talking about, not Trading Places.
No. Trading Places.
You said they're Trading Places. Okay.
For sure. Yeah. He's
You said it.
He's dressed as an African dude going on a train.
Sorry, I forgot.
It was an earlier. It was an earlier character. Yeah. There's a whole sequence on the train which is rather funny. So that's it. Well, enjoy the downtime. And you started by explaining us your planes, trains, and automobile situation. So make sure you come back to Montreal on time.
Yeah, I'm gonna again take the train to the airport tomorrow. So wish me luck. I think I have a better understanding of the Chicago train system now. But yeah, I will be. We'll see you all in the new year. Thanks so much for listening or watching. This new project that we've started with the SDPN people. It's been going really well, and wouldn't be possible without you guys watching and listening. So thank you for that. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.